In a distant future, far beyond the reach of Earth's fractured memory, humanity had long been eclipsed by advanced, extraterrestrial civilizations. These alien empires, beings of unimaginable power and vast, sprawling territories, ruled over the stars with a level of technology that Earth could never even comprehend. The Vraxians, the Velar, the Star, the names of these races were spoken with reverence and awe. They had conquered worlds, shaped realities, and governed the very laws of nature in ways humans could never have imagined. Humanity, having once been the dominant species on Earth, was relegated to the fringes of the galaxy. No longer considered a major player in the galactic scheme, they were seen as a curious relic of a time long past, fascinating but inconsequential. The human colonies that had once spread across distant stars were little more than outposts, left to be governed by the whims of the alien powers. Earth itself, its origins forgotten, was considered a backwater world, locked away in a quiet corner of the galaxy. But there was one thing the alien civilizations had overlooked: the humans who had never forgotten their potential. And among these humans was a young girl named Nova Trask. Nova was not unlike any other young girl in the human colonies. She had grown up in the shadow of alien power on a planet known as Celta 12, far from Earth but deeply rooted in human heritage. Celta 12 was a farming colony, a world of fields and small settlements, far from the hustle of galactic politics. Her family was modest, living off the land. Her father, a former military officer, had taught her the values of discipline and respect, while her mother, a former scientist, nurtured Nova's curious mind. Yet, from a young age, Nova was different. She could feel things that were inexplicable, things she didn't understand. At night, she would stare out at the stars, sensing something ancient and powerful calling to her. There were moments, fleeting and brief, when her body would hum with energy, as if the universe itself was vibrating with power inside of her. The people around her dismissed these strange occurrences as childhood fantasies or typical hormonal flare-ups. But Nova knew there was something else, something buried deep within her that no one could see. It was during a routine trip to the market on Celta 12 that Nova's true power revealed itself. She had just turned 16, and the day had started like any other. Walking through the bustling streets with her best friend Lila, Nova felt an odd sensation, a pull deep in her chest. It was faint at first, like a soft whisper in the back of her mind. But as she walked further into the marketplace, the feeling grew stronger. Suddenly, a violent explosion shook the entire district. Screams filled the air as people ran in all directions. Nova looked up to see a massive warship descending from the sky, its black hull casting a shadow over the market. It was an invasion. A ship of the Jthar, one of the most feared races in the galaxy, had appeared out of nowhere. Without thinking, Nova ran toward the chaos, her heart pounding in her chest. But as she approached the blast site, she felt the pull again, only this time, it wasn't faint, it was overwhelming. A surge of energy erupted from her body, and in an instant, everything around her froze. The world around her seemed to slow to a crawl. Time itself bent, and for a moment, Nova could see the threads of reality unraveling before her. She raised her hand, instinctively, as if guiding the flow of energy that pulsed through her. The alien ship that had been descending above her suddenly stopped midair, frozen in space. The soldiers on board, the civilians below, everything, the entire world seemed to pause, suspended in time. Nova's mind raced. She didn't know how she was doing this. She didn't know why, but the power inside her felt natural, as if it had always been there, waiting to be unlocked. And then, in a burst of sheer willpower, she released the energy. A wave of light erupted from Nova, shattering the stillness around her. The ship of the Jthar was thrown back, crashing into the ground with a violent explosion that sent shockwaves across the market. The soldiers within the craft were thrown into disarray, their advanced technology rendered useless by the power Nova had unleashed. As the dust settled and the world returned to normal, Nova stood in the middle of the street, panting heavily. She looked around, realizing the full extent of what she had done. Her power had not only stopped time, it had shattered the very fabric of space around her. She was no longer just a girl from a farming colony. She had become something else. Something powerful. In the days following the attack, Nova was a local hero. The Tsar had retreated, unwilling to engage with a force they couldn't comprehend. Their ships were too advanced for the people of Celta 12 to have posed a legitimate threat. The whole event was brushed aside by the authorities as a strange anomaly. But deep down, Nova knew something had changed. She wasn't just some girl anymore. She had tapped into a force that could reshape the galaxy. Soon after the incident, she began to receive strange messages, encrypted transmissions from across the galaxy, their sources unknown. They spoke of her power, referring to it as the Nexus, the secret force that had been hidden within humanity for eons. Nova's heart raced as she decoded the messages, each revealing fragments of an ancient history that tied her to a greater cosmic destiny. The humans who had long been forgotten in the eyes of the galaxy were not insignificant at all. They were connected to something far older, something far more powerful. Nova's mother, who had always been secretive about her own past, revealed something even more staggering. She had been part of an ancient organization, one that had tracked human potential for centuries. And Nova's power was not an accident. It was part of a plan, a hidden truth about humanity's connection to the universe. The Nexus was a weapon, a force older than time itself. It had been dormant, locked within the human genome, waiting for the right individual to awaken it. And now, that individual had arrived. News of Nova's incredible abilities spread quickly, and it didn't take long for the galaxy's most powerful factions to take notice. The alien empires, which had once considered humanity weak and inconsequential, now saw Nova as a threat, an existential one. The very existence of the Nexus was enough to cause fear in the hearts of every galactic power. The Tsar, the Vraxians, and the Velar all issued declarations. The humans had awakened something they didn't understand. Some viewed Nova as a weapon to be controlled, while others saw her as an abomination that threatened the galactic order. The galaxy's fragile peace was teetering on the edge of collapse. But Nova wasn't going to run. She couldn't. She had a responsibility now to understand her power and to wield it. To become more than just a girl from Celta 12. The destiny of humanity and the entire galaxy rested in her hands. As tensions mounted, Nova set out on a journey to uncover the secrets of the Nexus. She had no choice but to seek out those who understood its true nature, those who had hidden its power from the universe for centuries. Her travels took her to ancient ruins, hidden archives deep within the bowels of long-forgotten alien planets, and the forbidden corners of the galaxy. Along the way, she met allies who shared her cause. There was Kalen, a rogue Vraxian scholar who believed in the potential of humans, Lyra, a brilliant human tactician who had been trained in the art of war by the galaxy's finest commanders, and Jarek, a former soldier from Earth who had once fought in the Great Wars and now sought redemption by aiding Nova in her quest. Together, they pieced together the history of the Nexus. It was a weapon not of destruction, but of creation, a force that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The Nexus could bend time, space, and even the laws of nature itself. But it was not just a weapon of power, it was a key. The key to unlocking the true potential of the universe. To those who could wield it, nothing was impossible. Yet, as Nova grew stronger, she learned that not everyone had noble intentions. The alien empires, fearing what she could become, began to conspire against her. They sent assassins, spies, and entire fleets to capture her. But every time they struck, Nova's power only grew. She could bend the world to her will, stop time, and alter the very molecules around her. But there was a cost. The more Nova used the Nexus, the more she began to feel its weight. The power was infinite, but it was not without consequences. With each use, she began to lose a part of herself, her humanity. She could feel the toll it was taking on her body, on her soul. Was she destined to become something more than human, or would she be consumed by the very power that made her extraordinary? And if she couldn't control it, would she become the universe's most powerful weapon or its most dangerous threat? As Nova's power grew, so did the resistance against her. The galaxy's most powerful factions, once hesitant, now rallied together. The Vraxians, the Velar, and the Thar formed a coalition, each race seeing an opportunity to either control or destroy Nova before she could reach her full potential. The first real test of her abilities came when an armada of the galaxy's greatest fleets descended on Celta 12. The alien empires, seeking to destroy the threat once and for all, launched a combined assault. They thought they could overwhelm Nova with sheer force, but they had underestimated her. Nova stood at the center of the battlefield, surrounded by the massive alien ships that filled the sky. She reached out with her mind, feeling the pulse of the Nexus within her. She closed her eyes, and the world around her froze. The ships, the weapons, even the energy blasts that tore through the atmosphere, all of it stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. With a single motion, Nova released the energy. The ships disintegrated into nothingness, their weapons shattered, and the fleets were rendered helpless. But as the last of the ships fell, Nova collapsed, exhausted from the strain. She had won. But at what cost? The universe was beginning to see Nova Trask for what she truly was, the most powerful being to ever exist. And that power came with a price. In the aftermath of the battle, Nova stood alone among the shattered remnants of the alien fleets. Her mind was reeling, the echoes of the Nexus's energy still vibrating through her body. The cost of victory was heavy, and the toll it took on her was more than physical. As the dust settled, she felt a strange emptiness, a hollowness that began to spread deep within her. The power that had allowed her to save her world had also started to consume her, eroding the very essence of who she was. Her allies, Kaelin, Lyra, and Jarek, rushed to her side, concern etched on their faces. Kaelin, the Vraxian scholar who had believed in Nova's potential from the start, knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he reached for her. "Nova, you did it. But you need to rest. You've pushed yourself too far." Nova could barely look at him. His voice felt distant, like an echo in the recesses of her mind. The Nexus had awakened something inside her, something ancient and immense. But now, she feared it was turning her into something she couldn't control. "I don't think I can stop it," Nova whispered, her voice barely audible. "The power is too much. I'm losing myself. I can feel it. The darkness inside me. It's like a part of me is slipping away." Lyra, always the strategist, scanned the surroundings. "We need to get you back to the ship, Nova. You've done enough for now. We'll figure out a way to control this. There has to be a way." But Nova was no longer sure of that. She had once believed that the Nexus was a gift, a means to protect the galaxy from destruction, but now she wasn't so certain. The longer she used its power, the more detached she became from everything she once cared about: her friends, her family, even her own humanity. Jarek, the former soldier, knelt beside her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Nova, you're still you. You haven't lost yourself yet. But we need to find answers. There must be others who understand this power, people who can help you. We can't give up now." Nova nodded weakly, but a nagging doubt gnawed at her. Could she truly be saved? Or had she crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? In the days that followed, Nova's victory over the galactic fleets became a rallying cry across the universe. The surviving alien factions retreated, their confidence shattered, and the galaxy's balance of power shifted once more. But with that shift came new threats: powerful factions, ancient organizations, and individuals who sought to either control or destroy the Nexus for their own purposes. One such organization was the Shadow Council, a secretive and ancient cabal that had existed in the dark corners of the galaxy for millennia. The Shadow Council had always known about the Nexus, but it had kept its knowledge hidden, knowing the immense potential of such a power. For centuries, they had manipulated events from behind the scenes, ensuring that humanity remained unaware of the force that lay dormant within them. But now that the power of the Nexus had been awakened, the Shadow Council saw an opportunity they could not pass up. They knew that if they could control Nova, they could control the very fabric of reality itself. The Nexus could be used to reshape the galaxy in their image, to bend the laws of nature to their will. The Council dispatched its most formidable agents, sleek, shadowy operatives capable of infiltrating any stronghold and vanquishing any adversary. Their leader, a figure known only as the Enshrouded One, was a being of unknown origins, a master of manipulation and secrecy. The Enshrouded One understood the true nature of the Nexus, and they had no intention of allowing Nova to retain control of its power. As Nova and her team traveled deeper into the galaxy, seeking answers, they unknowingly moved into the grip of the Shadow Council's influence. They had no way of knowing that the Council had already placed spies among their ranks, and their every move was being watched. Nova had grown more distant in the weeks following the battle. She spent long hours meditating, trying to control the swirling maelstrom of energy inside her. But each day, the power grew stronger, and her ability to keep it at bay waned. Her friends, though loyal, couldn't understand the depth of her struggle. Lyra tried to keep her mind focused on their mission, finding those who knew about the Nexus, but Nova couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing control of herself. One night, as they traveled through the outer rim of the galaxy, Nova found herself alone in the observation deck of their ship. The stars outside seemed to blur as her thoughts spun in a whirlpool of uncertainty. She closed her eyes, trying to calm herself, but the power inside her seemed to pull at her, urging her to embrace it fully. "Nova, you're not alone in this," came Lyra's voice from behind her. "We're in this together." Nova turned to face her friend, her expression pained. "But you don't understand. This power, I'm afraid of what it's turning me into. I feel like I'm not even human anymore." Lyra walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are still you. This power doesn't define you. You define it." But Nova couldn't shake the feeling that her humanity was slipping away. The Nexus had become more than a tool, it had become a force that consumed her. Suddenly, the ship's sensors went off, a loud alarm blaring through the corridors. "We're under attack," shouted Kaylin over the intercom. "It's the Shadow Council, they've found us." Nova's heart sank. She knew this day would come, but she hadn't expected it to be so soon. Without thinking, she rushed to the bridge, her body humming with energy. The ship was surrounded by a fleet of sleek, shadowy vessels, their weapons charged and ready. "This is it," Kaylin said grimly, analyzing the enemy ships on the display. "They've come for you, Nova." Nova felt the power surge through her mind connecting with the Nexus as her body responded instinctively. For a moment, she hesitated. Was she truly ready to face these enemies? To confront the Shadow Council and risk losing herself entirely? But then she realized something. She didn't have to face this alone. Her friends were with her, and they were willing to fight by her side. They had already shown her that she wasn't defined by the power she held. Together, they could survive this together, they could protect the galaxy. Without another word, Nova raised her hand, and in an instant, the ship was enveloped in a field of energy. Time slowed, the enemy ships frozen in place as Nova reached into the very fabric of space and twisted it. The Shadow Council's fleet was immobilized, their weapons disarmed. But something was different this time. Nova's grip on the Nexus was weaker, strained. She could feel herself slipping, the energy of the universe surging around her in ways she couldn't control. For the first time, she was afraid of what she might unleash. In that moment, a voice spoke to her, a voice that wasn't her own, yet it felt familiar. "Embrace it, Nova. You are the key to everything. Don't hold back." The voice was the Enshrouded One, speaking directly into her mind. "You cannot escape what you are, Nova. The Nexus is yours. Accept it, and we will help you unlock your true potential." Nova gritted her teeth, her body trembling with the force of the energy within her. "I don't want this. I'm not some weapon to be controlled." But the voice persisted. "You are not just a weapon. You are the future. Embrace it." The battle raged around her as Nova's control began to slip further. She could feel the Nexus calling to her, urging her to take control of everything, to become the universe's most powerful being. As the Shadow Council's forces regrouped, preparing to launch their final assault, Nova realized the truth. They had underestimated her. They had underestimated humanity. The Nexus was hers, but so was her destiny. And she would fight for it for herself, for her friends, and for the future of the galaxy. The Nexus surged within Nova, its vast power pushing against the boundaries of her will. She could feel it, twisting her thoughts, altering her perceptions, as though the very essence of her being was being rewritten. The Enshrouded One's voice grew louder, more insistent, and with it came a wave of doubt, a reminder of the destiny she was meant to fulfill. Her vision blurred as she fought to maintain control. But the truth was undeniable. The Nexus was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the foundation of creation itself, a power capable of reshaping the fabric of reality. Nova had awakened it, and now it was calling her to become more than human. As the Shadow Council's fleet closed in, their weapons charged and their ships ready to strike, Nova's instincts took over. Without thinking, she extended her hands, and the stars themselves seemed to bend in response. The ship, the very fabric of space around her, distorted under the influence of the Nexus. The enemy fleet froze once more, their movement stilled in time as if they were trapped in a moment that couldn't move forward. But this time, Nova could feel the strain. The Nexus was pushing her, demanding that she release its full potential. The energy radiated through her body, her skin glowing with an intense, unnatural light. She could feel the weight of the universe pressing against her as her mind raced to maintain a grip on her humanity. Kaylin, Lyra, and Jarek watched from the command center of their ship, helpless as Nova fought to control the unimaginable power flowing through her. "Nova, stop!" Lyra shouted, her voice filled with desperation. "You're losing yourself. This is too much." "I can't hold it back much longer," Nova whispered, her voice strained as she attempted to push back the overwhelming tide of energy that threatened to consume her. But the more she resisted, the more the Nexus pressed upon her, pulling at the very core of her identity. In that moment, the Enshrouded One's presence loomed larger in her mind, the voice whispering with a finality that sent a chill down her spine. "You are the key to the galaxy's future, Nova. Embrace the power, and together we will remake the universe in our image. You will be more than you ever imagined. The galaxy will be yours to command." Nova's vision flickered between the distorted reality she was shaping and the faces of her friends. Their concern, their loyalty, their unwavering support, it was all so precious to her. They had stood by her, trusted her, and now she was on the verge of losing them forever. Was this the price of the power she had unlocked? To become something unrecognizable? With a final, strained breath, Nova released the energy within her, and the galaxy seemed to shatter. Time itself seemed to splinter as the Nexus collided with the fabric of reality. The ships of the Shadow Council faltered, their systems frozen in place, their crews immobilized by Nova's will. The very stars above them flickered as Nova's energy reached out, distorting everything in its path. But instead of conquering, Nova found herself confronting the full weight of what she had become. The ship trembled as the Nexus roared within her, overwhelming her senses. She felt as though she was being torn apart from the inside out, her humanity slipping through her fingers like sand. A deep, primal voice called out to her, a voice that resonated with the power of the Nexus itself. "Nova Trask, you have awoken the force that has slept for eons. You are its vessel, its conduit. The universe bends to your will now." "No," Nova whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "I won't let it define me." But her body no longer obeyed her commands. The Nexus surged forward, taking control, molding her into something that was no longer fully human. She felt herself slipping, losing touch with the person she had once been, the girl who had grown up on Celta 12, who had believed that her power could be used for good. Her friends, terrified by the transformation taking place before them, watched helplessly as Nova's features began to change. Her eyes burned with an otherworldly light, her skin crackling with energy, and her very presence seemed to warp reality itself. "Nova!" Kaylin shouted, reaching out to her. "You have to fight it." This is not you. But the Nova they knew was fading, replaced by something far more powerful and far more dangerous. It was then that the Enshrouded One made its presence known, manifesting as a dark figure in Nova's mind. It took shape in the space between her thoughts, a being composed of shadows and cold, ancient power. Nova, you cannot resist the Nexus. You are its heir. You were always meant to be. The figure's words echoed through her mind, their weight pressing down on her like a suffocating force. The galaxy trembled, and the very foundations of existence seemed to shift as Nova's consciousness wavered on the edge of oblivion. You're wrong, Nova whispered, though her voice seemed distant. I'm still me. I'm still human. But the Enshrouded One's laughter reverberated through her thoughts. Humanity was never your true nature, Nova. It was always a fade. Embrace your true power, and you will see the galaxy bend to your will. Desperately, Nova fought against the current, trying to cling to her humanity, to her friends. She thought of Celta 12, of her father's teachings, of the life she had once known. She thought of the people she loved, Kaylin, Lyra, Jarek. They believed in her, even now. For a brief moment, the fog of the Nexus seemed to recede, and Nova's true self shone through. She felt the strength of her will, the defiance that had driven her all her life. She was not a puppet to be controlled. She was not just a weapon. Her eyes flared with determination as she focused on the Shadow Council's fleet, now fully immobilized by the energy she had unleashed. She could feel the Nexus within her, but she would not allow it to take her completely. With a cry of willpower, Nova unleashed a final pulse of energy. The Nexus surged around her, but instead of shattering the universe, it folded inward, collapsing into itself. The power of the Nexus reverberated through the galaxy, and for the first time, Nova felt its presence recede. But the cost was immense. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed. The Shadow Council's forces were obliterated, their fleets shattered in the wake of Nova's power. But Nova stood at the center of it all, her body battered and drained, the energy of the Nexus still humming within her. She had won, but at what cost? Her friends rushed to her side, their faces a mixture of relief and fear. Kaylin placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with concern. Nova, you did it, he said softly, his eyes searching her face. But at what cost? Are you okay? Nova looked at them, her expression exhausted but resolute. The Nexus still pulsed within her, but she had regained control. She wasn't lost, at least, not entirely. I don't know, she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I will be. I have to be. The energy that had once threatened to consume her had been tamed, but Nova knew she could never fully let go of its power. She had embraced it, fought it, and ultimately found a way to control it, but the journey was far from over. The galaxy would never be the same. The Nexus had changed everything. And as Nova looked toward the stars, she realized that her journey was only just beginning. She would need to find a way to wield the power of the Nexus responsibly, to protect the universe from those who sought to control it. But she also knew that the future of the galaxy of humanity was now in her hands. With the support of her friends and the strength of her will, Nova Trask had become something new. Not a weapon. Not a puppet. A force of change. And the galaxy would never forget her name. The aftermath of Nova's victory was profound. The galaxy, once ruled by ancient alien powers and shadowy councils, was in a state of upheaval. Many factions, weakened by the battle with the Shadow Council, scrambled to reclaim control. Others, like the United Systems of Earth, hailed Nova as a hero, the one who had defeated the greatest threat to galactic peace. Yet beneath the celebrations and the rebuilding efforts, something darker began to stir. For Nova, the days after the final battle were filled with uncertainty. She had won, yes, but the cost of that victory was still taking its toll. The Nexus, the vast and ancient power she had awakened within herself, had not gone away. It whispered to her in the silence of her mind, reminding her of what she had become and what she could still be. And while Nova was able to suppress its influence, there were moments when the power felt like it was slipping through her grasp, threatening to take control once again. In these quiet moments, Nova found herself walking the fine line between mastery and madness. She had tried to return to a normal life with her friends Kaylin, Lyra, Jarek, but the weight of her new reality hung over her like a dark cloud. They had been through so much together, and Nova couldn't bear the thought of losing them to the same fate she feared for herself. Still, as much as she wanted to return to a time of peace and simplicity, she knew that the universe had changed. The Nexus had reshaped everything, and she had become the fulcrum on which the galaxy now balanced. Others would come for her, those who sought to control her, to use her power for their own ends. Nova stood on the bridge of the ship, looking out at the stars that stretched infinitely before her. She wasn't alone. Kaylin stood beside her, his face full of concern, his usual scholarly detachment replaced by worry. He had been her closest ally, her confidant, but even he could see how much she was struggling. "You're not yourself, Nova," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken fears. "The Nexus is changing you. You're holding on, but how long can you keep this up?" Nova closed her eyes, her thoughts flickering between the dark whispers of the Nexus and the memories of her old life. She wanted to believe she could control it, that she could be the hero the galaxy needed. But there were moments when she felt something inside her, something alien and primal awakening, waiting to break free. "I don't know, Kaylin," she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know how much longer I can hold on." But even as she said it, Nova knew she couldn't let go. The power of the Nexus was a part of her now. It had given her strength to save the galaxy, but it had also shown her how fragile her control was. "I wish there was a way to remove it," Kaylin continued, his eyes scanning the stars. "We need to find someone who understands this power, someone who can help you." "I've tried," Nova whispered, the words heavy with regret. "But there's no one left. The Nexus is unique. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's something far beyond anything we understand." Kaylin turned to her, placing a hand on her arm. "Then we'll find a way together. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we're with you." Nova smiled weakly, grateful for his words. But she knew they were running out of time. The Nexus was a force beyond their comprehension, and if they didn't act soon, it might destroy everything they had fought for. As the weeks passed, Nova and her crew traveled deeper into the galaxy, seeking answers. They visited old ruins, ancient temples, and hidden archives in the hopes of finding someone or something that could help her understand the Nexus and its true power. But the more they searched, the more elusive the answers became. One night, as they made their way through the abandoned space station known as the Council's Reach, Lyra came across a disturbing report buried deep within the station's archives. It was an old file, one that had been hidden away for centuries. The file detailed the creation of the Nexus and the ancient civilization that had once harnessed its power. According to the data, the Nexus had not been an accidental discovery. It had been intentionally crafted by a race of beings known as the Architects, an ancient and powerful species who had once ruled the galaxy. They had created the Nexus as a tool to control the very fabric of reality itself. But the power had proven too great, and the Architects had eventually disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and fragmented knowledge. The file also contained a warning. The Nexus is not a tool to be wielded. It is a living entity, a force that cannot be contained. Those who attempt to control it will be consumed by it. And the Architects knew this truth all too well. Nova stared at the screen, her heart racing. "They knew what this power could do," she murmured. "They knew it could destroy everything." Lyra stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "This doesn't make sense. Why would they create something like this? Why would they leave it for anyone to find?" "I don't know," Nova replied, her voice cold. "But it's clear now that the Nexus is more than just a weapon. It's a force of nature. And I'm the one who awakened it." Jarek, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "So, what do we do now? Do we just give up? We can't ignore this. There's got to be a way to stop it." Nova shook her head, her eyes burning with determination. No. I won't let it control me. I'll find a way to harness it to make it work for us, for the galaxy. There has to be something in all this ancient knowledge that can help me. But as Nova spoke, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision, something far darker than the Nexus itself. An enemy, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Before anyone could react, the space station's alarm system blared. The crew rushed to the bridge, only to find the station's hull vibrating with the incoming shockwaves of a massive fleet. Who are they? Lyra asked, scanning the enemy vessels. But even as she spoke, Nova could feel the darkness spreading. A presence familiar and terrifying hovered just beyond the edges of her mind. They know about the Nexus, Nova said, her voice tight with realization. They've been watching us all along. Jarek clenched his fists. Who are they, Nova? The architects, Nova replied. Or, at least, what's left of them. The fleet that now surrounded them was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't just a military force, it was a remnant of something ancient, something that had been waiting in the shadows for millennia. The ships were sleek and elegant, their designs both alien and familiar. They were built with materials that defied conventional physics, their energy signatures unlike anything Nova had seen before. These were not just warriors. They were the last of the architects, the creators of the Nexus. And they had returned, not to seek peace, but to reclaim what was theirs. Nova stood at the helm, the crew at her side, as the enemy fleet closed in. I've been trying to hold on to my humanity, Nova whispered, her voice filled with both awe and dread. But I think the time for that is over. Kaylin's voice was steady but filled with concern. What do you mean? This is what I was meant for, Nova said, turning to face her friends. The Nexus is not just a part of me. I am the Nexus. And if I'm going to protect everything we've fought for, I have to embrace it. Completely. Her friends looked at her in shock, but Nova had already made up her mind. The architects had returned, and they would either help her understand the Nexus or they would become her greatest enemy. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The end, a new dawn. The architects had returned. Their ships, ancient and sleek, surrounded Nova's crew. They were the creators of the Nexus, the force Nova had awoken within herself, and now they sought to reclaim it. But Nova had made her choice. She was no longer just a girl, she was the Nexus incarnate, and she would not allow her power to be taken from her. Standing before the looming fleet, Nova's eyes burned with determination. Her friends Kaylin, Lyra, and Jarek stood by her side, uncertain but resolute. They had been through so much together, and now it was time for Nova to embrace what she had become. The architect's leader, a figure shrouded in ancient energy, spoke through a broadcast. You cannot control what you do not understand, Nova Trask. The Nexus is ours to command. Return it, or we will take it from you. Nova's voice echoed through the comms, cold and unwavering. You may have created the Nexus, but it is mine now. You will not control it again. The battle was inevitable. The architect's fleet charged, but Nova's power, now fully awakened, surged like a tidal wave, shattering their advance. She was a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, bending reality to her will. But Nova didn't seek domination. She sought balance. The Nexus was too powerful for anyone to control fully. As the architect's ships disintegrated in the aftermath of their failed assault, Nova made her final decision: the Nexus would never again fall into the hands of those who sought to enslave it. It would remain with her, but she would guard it, use it responsibly, and ensure that the galaxy was never again on the brink of destruction. The galaxy had changed, but so had Nova. She was no longer just a girl. She was the guardian of the Nexus, and the future of the universe rested in her hands. And as the stars stretched before her, Nova knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.